YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with my updated college football rankings just before conference championship week, a big week ahead. A lot of changes from last week to this week. We'll break that all down, a lot of big outcomes. So we'll break that all down. We'll also go over what the playoff looks like, what it could look like, and maybe some scenarios if it ended up like that. So a lot to go over. Also doing a separate video later predicting the scores to every conference championship game. So that should be a lot of fun. Also have plenty of NFL content on the channel. If you don't, please subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to that 40K by the end of the year. It's going to be a close one. It's going to be a close one, folks. So help us out. Subscribe. Full NFL and college football content. We'll have you covered for all the bowl games. Click that like button. Check us out on Twitter at GoatHouseNFL. Really appreciate you guys. But to the rankings. Starting off at number 25, and we'll work our way up there to number 1. You can kind of get an idea who's moving up, who's moving down the most, and we'll kind of reveal that. The only team that's dropped is Virginia Tech after a very disappointing loss. I started to get some hype going for that team, and they kind of let me down there. 25 is Oklahoma State. Yeah, they lost to Oklahoma. They have another loss. I didn't really feel any other team was, deserving of swooping in that much. And Oklahoma State, losing to Oklahoma without your quarterback and Tyler Wallace, who's their star receiver, to me that kind of plays a part. And you still have 4 losses, but tough schedule. Had some good wins. They'll remain at number 20. They'll remain in the top 25 at 25. They were 23 last week. 24 is Navy. They were at 25. They beat Houston. They move up 1 spot mainly because Virginia Tech is out of the rankings, and Oklahoma State moved back 1. So that means a new team is obviously in. Number 23 is USC. They were number 24 for me last week. They're bumped up to 23. Another 4-loss team. Having that win over Utah, even though some guys from Utah got hurt, and having that tough schedule kind of helps when they have they're a 4-loss team. But the difference between them, Oklahoma State, is that win over Utah. They are up to number 23. And then, obviously a big difference in maybe a record against Navy, a big difference in schedule. And when we're at this point of the season, I'm a firm believer that USC is a much better team than Navy. Resume and body work does matter, though, but I still have USC at 1 ahead. App State's at 22. They were at 22 last week, so they got a big game in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. We'll see if they can finish it off with 1 loss on the year. Number 21 is Cincinnati. They were number 19, so they didn't really move down too much. Tough game against Memphis, lost by 10. Knew that would be a pretty good game. Thought Memphis would win it. And they got to play again. Again, we'll do the score predictions of all of the conference championship games in a separate video later today, which is the 2nd of December. But Cincinnati only moved down a couple spots. Didn't really think some of these other teams based on either, well, in general, their resume. Whether it's the record playing a part with, their body, who they played, their schedule. I didn't really feel like moving some of these other teams ahead of them for those reasons. Losing to Ohio State, Memphis, have some solid wins in the AAC. There's some battles in there. So they're at number 21 there, just moving down a few spots. And number 20 is Boise State. They move up 1 spot, mainly because other teams moving down. Boise against Colorado State, not insanely impressive or anything, just mainly what other teams are doing. Number 19 is Virginia. So the Cavaliers are the new team, the new school added to the rankings, and they boost up to 19. Virginia Tech, I was starting to get pretty hyped on, because you look at what they've done the second half of the season and look at what they've done with Hendon Hooker at quarterback. They were 6-0 with Hooker at quarterback in the top 10 of scoring offense. And then they had the one game they did not play with them down the stretch was Notre Dame, which they lost by 1 point. So this team was impressive. Virginia just had a hell of a game plan for the ACC title, clinching game for the ACC title to play Clemson. Bryce Perkins played out of his mind in that game. And the defense, they gave up some points, but they stepped up when they needed to. I think the start of the game was key. If you kind of look back, the defense started big time, forcing field goals rather than touchdowns. And they got some turnovers too. So Virginia, it's a likable team. It's a very likable team, and they're heading in the right direction. So they're up to 19. Pretty solid resume too, unlike most ACC teams. Number 18 is Iowa. They were 20. They're moving up 2 spots. It's tough to move them up 2 spots with the close call against Nebraska. It's a game they should be comfortable in. It should almost be, it should almost be a lock of a win. And it made it interesting. So it's tough moving up 2 spots for that. But you had some other teams losing, and you just can't put the teams behind them ahead of them. They've had an impressive resume, not super impressive on the wins. They've had some tough losses. Very good defense, one of the top defenses in the nation. They wish it was a little more comfortable against Nebraska. I guess some teams have those games sometimes. They still won. So they're up to 18. I do wish they had some better wins, but for a 3-loss team, definitely deserving to be well inside the top 25. Michigan is another 3-loss team. They're at 17. It's tough because, I got to respect Michigan, especially because their schedule, look at non-conference, at least they play Notre Dame. I got to respect the schedule, and they beat up on Notre Dame too, but they had 3 losses now and a tough one against Ohio State. If you look at the score, it looks like they got beat pretty bad. It did feel a little closer than the score showed. Michigan, Shea Patterson struggled in terms of completing passes. You expect him to complete. There was some drops, some crucial drops, a lot of mistakes in the red zone. So that's why I say the game felt a little closer. Michigan was actually able to move the ball. A big improvement from their offense from first half of the season till now. Big improvements with 3 losses. They are down to 17, and I guess it matters a little more what you're doing now, obviously, than early in the year, but, it's still part of the body of work. They were a little shaky in the beginning of the year, but it's good to see them playing a little better now. Number 16 is going to be Minnesota. It's another Big Ten team. That's 3 in a row. Michigan, by the way, did go down to 17 from 13, and Minnesota was number 9 to number 16. Them being so high for me was just based off what they've done this year. Mainly record-wise, they did have the win over Penn State, but I always said, I said this in the beginning of the year when doing these rankings, time will put the right teams in the right spots, and that's really sums up Minnesota. Time will put them in the right spot. They go against Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was just too good for them. A lot more toughness in that game too, in the snow. And they just really weren't even. It was closer, for the first half possibly, but they couldn't really match up Wisconsin. They could not match up with them. So time showed us that Minnesota really couldn't hang on. So they drop from 9 to 16. Still a very impressive year. Nobody really expected them to be as good as they were this year. And they got they got a bright future, I think, with Fleck, and there's a lot of good young talent. So they are down to number 16 from number 9. Number 15, moving up from 17, is Memphis, and they had an impressive win over Cincinnati. A very impressive year for Memphis. Obviously, pretty close to being undefeated, so that kind of hurts at a time like this, but you got to be happy the team is playing very well. They got to play Cincinnati again. Kind of tough to beat a team 2 times. Usually they say it's really tough to beat the team 3 times, but 2 times, I'm confident in them winning. Again, we'll predict the scores of all the conference championship games, separate video. But Memphis, pretty solid team. Almost moved them up another spot, but it was tough to move Notre Dame down. You couldn't really move this team down. It seems like since that Michigan game, which was downpour in Michigan, disaster for Notre Dame, since that game, they've gotten a lot better. The VTech game looked a little shaky, but it turned out VTech was playing pretty well. Since then, they played pretty good. Stanford game was a little scary early on. They made adjustments, and they showed they were the much better team. And even with all the injuries they had, because Notre Dame's identity was, if you had to pick one identity, it's pass rush. I thought they had, going into the season, they had one of the better pass rushers in the country, and their best pass rusher, Julian Okwara, and then their third best pass rusher in Hayes. They both went down for the season, so it's tough to overcome that, and they're still able to do that. Looks like the offense is getting better. So couldn't really move them down. They're at 14. Really no room to move them up, though, because what's going on ahead of them, even though Michigan did fall below them, another team I put up, Penn State is going to be 13, and they were actually number 12. I actually moved them down. It's mainly what the other teams did to move up in my rankings. That's 90%, that's what it is. Maybe 95%, we'll say. A little part of it is, they were a little shaky against Rutgers. End up being, I guess, a comfortable win, but you like them to execute a little better. I haven't really been in love with Penn State the last few weeks. In looking at their resume, too, they don't have the best wins. They were sloppy against Minnesota. There's not a whole bunch of very impressive wins. I know some people consider Pittsburgh, one of their better wins. That kind of, Pittsburgh's not a bad team. It's a good team. It's a team that can... It's at one of those sneaky teams, but, I wish they had better wins, but they're still at 13 here with a good season, but they are down from 12 to 13. And another team that actually moved down one spot is the Oregon Ducks, and it's the same explanation for Penn State. It's mainly 95% of it is what other teams did, or maybe one specific team did or two to move up. But, you wish they were a little more comfortable against Oregon State. Oregon State was without their quarterback Lutton too. So the Arizona State game, I guess, took a little bit out of them. They got a big game, Pac-12 championship against Utah. I keep mentioning it, but I have a score predictions video for all conference championship games coming up. So hopefully everyone is looking forward to that. Number 11, this is where it gets really tough. But moving from 16 to 11 for me is the Badgers, Wisconsin Badgers here. Now, this is a lot of movement for me. I was lower on them than everybody else's rankings. The committee may have them higher than 11, and they may be in the top 10. For me, it's that Illinois loss is what kind of keeps them outside. And we're going to reveal the next team so I kind of can discuss it. Alabama I have down at 10. So Wisconsin went from 16 to 11, and Alabama went from 6 to 10. So a bit of a drop there. But why Alabama ahead of Wisconsin with the same record? And you kind of look at who they played, Wisconsin's resume is a little better. I think they're a little better. Maybe Alabama's lost to the better teams overall. But when they're pretty much the same, same record, better body of work for Wisconsin, I look at the two teams, and to me, head-to-head, these two teams, I think Alabama, without a doubt, is the better team. So that is the difference for me. You look at the execution of Alabama. Even without Tua, they're still able to put up points, but that was a tough one for me. It was really close just because, I know Bama's the better team, but Wisconsin has a better body of work. If Wisconsin had less losses, more wins, there would be no question. And then another factor in there is the Illinois loss. Like, that is a loss. That one hurts. You can't have that loss, in my opinion, like to be a top 10. You could, depending on what other teams do, but that one is a must win because you can't lose it. You just can't lose that game, and that kind of hurts a little bit and could be the difference. But I was able to move Wisconsin up from 16 to 11 because of a big win over Minnesota. And it seems like their offense is getting a little better. It seems like it's getting a little better the way they've been playing. They got a rematch against Ohio State, Big Ten championship game. I think a little different scoreline in that one, definitely compared to last time. Number 9 is Auburn. So here's another. Maybe something we can debate here in the comments is Auburn going from number 15 to number 9 beating Alabama, but they have 3 losses. They have 3 losses. Alabama has 2. You look at the differences here. You look at who they played, the body of work, head-to-head, all that points to Auburn. All of it. All of it points to Auburn. And I think they're a very dominant team, and they've proven, because you're looking at Alabama, Wisconsin, the difference, trying to split the hairs there, trying to split it up back and forth. I'm confident that Alabama's the better team, but you're looking at Auburn, they have the body. Yeah, they have more losses, but they have the body of work, the tougher schedule. They have some really good wins. They have the win over Alabama, which was most recent. So that is enough for me. That is enough for me. To put them one spot ahead of Bama. They went from 15 to number 9 after that impressive win over Bama there. It was a weird game. You didn't. They did have 2 pick sixes, so I think one of the better defenses in the country, Auburn, did come up clutch, even though they gave up a lot of points. But the offense is what I was impressed with. Bo Nix and the guys really stepped it up when they really needed to. Nobody. Alabama scoreline, I guess people could have predicted. Auburn scoreline, nobody could have predicted, so they had to do exactly that to win that game. Number 8, moving up from number 10, is Baylor. A big dominant win over Kansas. Yeah, not the most valuable one, but still slightly impressed with that. And a team that's been very good this year. Not loving the Big 12 this year, honestly, but very impressive team. I think they can compete, maybe not with the top tier guys, but the teams around these parts here. But yeah, looking at the difference between Auburn and Baylor, 1 loss, 3 loss, that'll be the difference to keep Baylor in the top 8, and they'll have the rematch, the revenge game against the comeback they blew. Actually, with my number 7 team, Oklahoma. People may be surprised to not see Oklahoma move up at all. They stay at 7. Pretty lucky they were able to play Oklahoma State without their quarterback and top player, or one of top players, with Wallace, obviously Hubbard being maybe their top player. But And it was a little sloppy at times. It looked comfortable at the end, but they're at number 7. It's a team. I don't think this team is playoff material based on what they've done this year. It's a sneaky team. They can sneak up on anybody, even I guess the very solid teams. Jalen Hurts can play like a Heisman one game and a little sloppy the next. Obviously, we know the defense isn't the best from the Big 12, but they're at number 7. I just think the Florida Gators need to be in the top 6 discussion. Looking at Auburn beating Bama, that actually helps Florida. That actually boosts them because they have that win over Auburn. Obviously, Florida's 2 losses are LSU and Georgia, yet to be revealed there. Let's actually reveal my top. We can reveal my top 6 right now as we're talking about Florida there. So, and the rest is pretty obvious. So the Florida Gators are number 6. Looking at the body of the work, one of the top defenses in the country. They put up a good fight with some of those other teams like LSU. And it seemed like the offense got better as the season went on. I just like their resume much better. To me, obviously, there's one more loss than Oklahoma. But to me, the Florida Gators are the better team. And the body work, the resume shows it, but what they do on the field shows it as well. I think they're the better team. So I had no problem putting the Gators over the Sooners. I got Florida at 6. I still got Utah at 5. A little scary very early in that Colorado game, but then they kind of busted through. They can't start that slow against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. But a very well-balanced team, Utah, like I've been saying, and I've been saying every single week, that they have a good loss. It's the USC, but Zach Moss, their star player, star running back, and Tyler Huntley, their quarterback, both got hurt in that game. A game they would have won with those guys. So to me, that's a good loss. 4 is Georgia. When it's all said and done, do I think Georgia is playoff material? Playoff material, yeah, they can be. I don't know if they're a top 4 team in the nation. They scare me sometimes with their passing game. They rely on their run game too much, rely on their defense too much when the run game's kind of figured out, and teams make them pass. They've been close to some situations. They barely escaped some teams. A&M was even a little close, and we see what LSU did to them this last week. And obviously, the loss to South Carolina hurts. That one is. It's one of those ones you can't lose, but at the end of the day, they have one loss. They play in the SEC. They got some good wins. The win over Florida and Auburn are just big for them. So they are at number 4. Number 3 is Clemson. People are sleeping on Clemson. I mean, this is a top-tier team. We very well could be sitting here with Clemson holding that trophy again. Could win that title again. I think this really could be the top defense in the country, and the offense is getting better and better. We have yet to see playoff Clemson. The top team. We haven't seen Clemson play to their best abilities yet. They have more, I promise you. And we've seen a pretty good dominant win over South Carolina to kind of prove a little bit. It doesn't mean a whole bunch. You can't look at 2 teams and compare them based on what they've done the other teams. I'm aware of that, but it is kind of interesting and weird that the number 3 team absolutely obliterated South Carolina, and number 4 team indeed lost them. I know Georgia got better since then, but it is a little interesting. Number 2 is Ohio State. A big-time win against Michigan. Ohio State's been more of a defensive team. No, they've been both. That's not fair to say. But they've had more defense throughout this year than they showed in that game. Like I said, I was talking about when I was on Michigan. Michigan's offense pushed the ball. The Ohio State was pretty fortunate at times with some drops or the mistakes in the red zone. This game could have been a lot closer, but Ohio State's offense executed flawlessly. Just amazing that Justin Fields was able to go down. I was a little scared, too, because that would not only ruined, him, maybe his future. Not that he can't bounce back, but it would have ruined the playoffs as well if that guy went down for good. So he came back and threw a touchdown pass rolling out to the left. It was beautiful. So Ohio State, number 2. Defense, though, what happens when they play a team like Clemson, LSU? I haven't worried at all about their defense all year. It's just one game, can't overreact from it, but just always something in the back of my mind, just like it's in the back of our mind about LSU. We've seen them give up some points. To me, it's not that big of a deal because SEC opponents, and it's a lot of garbage time. They get a huge lead early. Like if you ever watch football, any type of football, that's usually what happens. You get a huge lead early, like they're blowing their team out. The game's pretty much over. Let's just let this play on. That's usually what happens. You wish some games were a little more comfortable. I'm not concerned at all. To me, this is the hands-down number 1 team. I don't know how Ohio State could be number 1. Ohio State, at the very end, could be the national champion. They're a great team, very good team, elite team. Just looking at the body of work, the execution on the field, everything combined, I just don't see how you can what LSU has done to not deserve number one. That's more what it is. It's not really Ohio State. It's more of what LSU has done to not be number one. You can't find a thing. You cannot find a thing. And again, even A&M wasn't even ranked, but it's a pretty good team. And you see what Georgia does to them. You see what LSU does to them. I mean, this is just a dominant team. Dominant team. You wish their defense a little better at times, I suppose. They got playmakers on defense. I think it's getting better. To me, this is number one team. So if the playoff ended this way, I do this every week. LSU versus Georgia, who's in the SEC championship, I'd pick LSU. Clemson, Ohio State, I would actually take Clemson. I think Clemson has the better defense. Offense is pretty comparable, pretty even. I think people are really sleeping on Clemson. But any game between LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, any of those playing each other, it'd be a damn good game. It would have that national championship feel. But to me, with LSU not in the not in the game, it's not 100% the national championship feel. To me, LSU's the best team. I'd take them over Clemson, but that would be a great game as well. Who do I actually think is going to make the playoff? I think Utah wins the Pac-12. We'll go over my score prediction in that video. If they win that, I think they'll be in at that 4 spot. I don't see how Oklahoma can jump them with the win. Very interesting. I was ruling the Florida Gators out at one point, but maybe there is a slight chance. It really depends on we see their rankings. Based on my rankings, it looks like there's a chance, but my rankings are just my opinion. Don't mean much, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, some people out there. But I think the Gators, when it's all said and done, could be. I know they lost to Georgia, but those two teams I think are that good where they actually, even though neither of them will probably be in, is my point that they can be playoff material, even though maybe they're not the 4th best team in the nation. But we'll reveal the rankings once again. That's the full rankings. You see that. So maybe a lot of surprises. We still didn't see the college football committees, playoff committees rankings, but I know we'll have. I like where I have Wisconsin. That is plenty high with the loss to Illinois. I know people will disagree with me. Having Auburn over Alabama, I know people will disagree with me, but I explained that in depth. All signs point to Auburn being ahead of Alabama. Me having Florida over Oklahoma, I think people have a problem with that, but just because of record. But look at the body of work, and you can just tell which team is just much better than the other. If they played head-to-head, there's no doubt in my mind the Florida Gators would win. So they are at number 6. So everything else seems to be probably in check with it. I was a fan of the AP poll. I'm pretty close to that. For the most part. Obviously, there's some things here and there, but usually I have a bigger problem with it. But, let me know your guys' thoughts. Score predictions for the conference championship game. We'll take a look at the lines. All that all in one video is coming later tonight, which is the 2nd. If you're listening to this past December 2nd, that video will be already up. So, appreciate you guys. We're going to cover bowl games, all the bowl games, obviously, and full NFL content coverage here at the Goat House. Even in the offseason, we got you covered. Go ahead and click that like button, click that subscribe button, help us get to that 40K goal. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Goodbye.